Hi, I'm Conrad Marshall, and from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, welcome to Good Weekend Talks, a magazine for your ears featuring in-depth conversations with fascinating people from sport and politics, science and culture, business and beyond. Every week you can download new episodes in which top journalists from across our newsrooms talk to compelling people about the definitive stories of the day. In this episode, we speak with Curtis Stone. The Melbourne-born LA-based chef has run 2 celebrated restaurants in that city, earning several Michelin stars and praise from critics. Yet in Australia, he's better known as the face of Coles, for whom he's been an ambassador for 15 years. The distinction doesn't worry him though. Stone is too busy flipping restaurants to keep up with LA's changing tastes, as well as cooking at fire fundraisers and posting cheesy declarations of love to his wife on Instagram. He's back in town right now, about to cook lunch for 1,700 people at Melbourne Food and Wine Festival's flagship event, the world's longest lunch, in King's Domain on March 21st. And hosting this conversation, which covers everything from run-ins with restaurant critics to how Aussie pies are being received in LA, is Good Food's Eating Out and Restaurants editor in Melbourne, Emma Breheny.
Thanks, Conrad, and hi, Curtis.
How you doing?
First of all, how are you and your family going following the LA fires? Because I understand that you guys are in Malibu, is that right?
We live in Brentwood, which is the neighbouring suburb to the Palisades. So yeah, it's been horrible what's happened. You know, the fire sort of burnt all the way up to our street. So lots of our neighbours, you know, lost their homes. We luckily didn't. But yeah, the whole neighbourhood's been pretty devastated for sure.
Yeah, awful. How did the neighbourhood and the restaurant community sort of react to the fires? What were you seeing in terms of people responding?
The restaurant business is always incredibly generous in the way it responds to any kind of disaster. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure why, you know, but they do. The restaurant industry is always the first one to jump on board and help people out. Maybe it's because hospitality is the nature of what it is. You know, it's nurturing and it's giving, and that's kind of just what we do. We're doing a big fundraiser this week, actually, which has a bunch of incredible chefs coming on board to sort of help out. So the restaurant industry always finds its way to sort of help people out. And it has been really cool watching the neighbourhood respond the way it has. You know, people that ran a food truck started like a sort of an opportunity for people to come and get clothes and just stuff that they needed, people that had been displaced or lost their homes. So yeah, there's been a really beautiful community response to it. But yeah, Aussies are no stranger to fires, so we know what it's like to live through this. And yeah, this one was particularly brutal.
Yeah, it really was. Well, yeah, I'm glad to hear that you guys are all okay. You opened a new venue, the Pie Room in Los Angeles late last year, and I believe you ran that as a pop-up during the pandemic initially. How are Americans responding to the idea of a pie shop? Because to them, a pie is a sweet thing and, You know, we have really different ideas of baked goods between Australians and Americans. What we call biscuits, they call cookies. How are they going? How are they responding to it?
Look, during the pandemic, the response was bananas. You know, and I was like, is it because it's the pandemic and no one's got anything else to do or can't go to restaurants? You know, we were selling big pies, both meat and sweet, and, you know, sweet and savory. And, yeah, we'd sell out every day. And I wasn't sure whether it was just because of the pandemic or not. But since we reopened, it's still very popular. You know, it's a busy little spot. And I think people, the interesting thing is people have done Aussie pie shops before and they've never really worked over here. And I've always wondered why, but I think it's because a meat pie is so foreign to Americans that when you tell them that that's what they should eat, they kind of scratch their head a little. What we did differently was we sold a lot of sweet stuff too. So Americans make beautiful sweet pies, apple pie, pumpkin pie. I know Aussies are a bit like pumpkin pie. It can be really good. Key lime pie, they have some real winners. So we started selling those as well as the meat pie. So people would probably come in for the sweet stuff, and we saw our sales on the sweet side like 80-20 in the early days, and then it balanced out to be more 50-50, because I think once people see it, they're like, all right, I'll try it. I'll try this sausage roll thing that you're talking about. And then they eat it and they're like, that thing's good. So then they come back for it, So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, amazing. The ordeals of opening and running a restaurant have really been forefront in popular culture thanks to The Bear, the TV show that's won something like 20 Emmys and has spawned lots of Yes Chef memes. Have you watched The Bear?
I haven't, no. I've watched a couple of episodes, but I haven't watched the season. It's a bit like watching a day at work, so I'd rather just live my reality and watch something else. What I saw of it, I did like. I would watch it. I just haven't got around to it.
Yeah. A few chefs have said to me that it kind of gives them PTSD of the stresses of working in a kitchen during a really busy service.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, I've always thrived on that busyness, that crazy, that anxiety of, am I going to be ready for service? I know it sounds ridiculous, but I've always really loved that. And my wife will tell you that I still arrive too late to the airport and I have to run for every plane that I catch. And she's like, it's because of what you do for a living. I can just see it. That's you love that idea of it might not work out, but somehow it always does. Yeah, I can't explain it. I'm not a psychologist, but there is something about it that I do love.
Do you still get that rush at the bakery, the pie room?
Not as much. It's a much more chilled service. Although the bakery, because there's two things. There's we have a 6,000 square foot bakery. So we have a lamination room. So we do all of our viennoiserie in there. We have a pie room. We have a chocolate room. So there's lots going on in that bakery. And they start at 4:00 in the morning and they bake, and then they make once that bake's gone out. But that first delivery sort of leaves at 7:00 in the morning to go to the pie room. So it's still a fun energy in there. And I'm not a baker, I mean, I love baking, but I didn't do an apprenticeship in pastry or being a baker. So it's something I've sort of come to later in my career, but I love it. I love that idea of kneading bread and making it. I'm still nowhere near as talented as the bakers that work with me. I know how to make a good pie and a good dough and a good sausage roll, but yeah, I get my thrill in service at Gwen. That's okay.
I understand that you closed your other LA restaurant, Maud, to open the pie room. What were your reasons for doing that and sort of flipping into another style of venue?
Maud was in its 11th year. And it was such a fun restaurant because we changed the menu every month when we first opened, and it was a new ingredient every month. So we'd try and come up with 10 dishes or 12 dishes that would use that same ingredient. And when you're doing an artichoke menu, coming up with 3 artichoke desserts or an asparagus, it was a really creative mission, and it was fun. It was so fun. It also nearly killed me, it was really challenging. And by the first or second week of the new menu, you just get everyone dialed in, and then you'd be like, oh my God, I'm so behind on next month's menu. So it was this like creative treadmill that you could never get off, which was awesome. And then we did a couple of iterations of Maud. At one point we flipped it. We kind of ran out of ingredients. We did 5 years almost, so, choose your 50 favorite ingredients and then try and do another 12 ingredients for the next year. And you're like, white asparagus, or what about, you start sort of twiddling your thumbs because we didn't want to repeat ingredients. Anyway, Maud was fantastic. It was a 24-seat dining room. We refined it even more and made it 20 seats, and it was so fun, but it was also all-consuming. I'm a dad and a husband, and I have Gwen and I have Wood End in Mexico, another great restaurant. So I didn't want to just be like one thing my whole life. I did it for 11 years, and I didn't want to keep doing it and have it be inauthentic where I wasn't the one creating the menu. And I've always sort of had a bit of a thing for chefs that don't show up to work. And I never wanted to be one of those guys. So I thought it was time for something new.
Okay. So this gives you, the new venue gives you more time to get around to all your restaurants. Is that the idea? Yeah,
look, Gwen probably started off as a restaurant that was meat-centric, it wasn't as precious as Maud. Certainly, Maud was a lot more intricate in the way we played it and the way we, I had 24 staff members for a 20-seat dining room. It was pretty, a lot of intensity in the way we approach stuff. Gwen was always meant to be a little simpler than that. We cook everything on live fire. We source incredible meats. It's got a butcher shop. So, it was a different style of restaurant. But I couldn't kind of quite help myself. So I put more intricacies into that. And the more I was finding, I was a bit torn in between those two places. So Gwen's probably developed into something more than it was maybe intended to be, which is awesome. It's super exciting. And, it's a really busy, fabulous restaurant. We love it. And the pie room was meant to be a bit of fun, I'm super proud of being an Aussie, and I'm proud of the food that we cook and serve in Australia. And I kind of thought there was an opportunity to do that. And, it's more than just a pie shop. We do all sorts of things in there, but it doesn't require me every single day of my life there, nose to the grindstone,
It's been a tough couple of years for LA dining. Even before the fires, there's been something like 150 restaurants that have closed in the last 2 years. And the LA Times said that 2023 was the year that killed restaurants. What's going on? What is driving these closures?
God, if I had the answer in a nutshell, I think I'd be able to share that with everyone, and we'd all change tactics and do something slightly different. So I don't think anyone really knows the truth of it. I think meal delivery has played a big factor in certain restaurants. That was never something we did. We've never done meal delivery, until now with the pie room. But it wasn't something, you're not like, do I order food in or do I go to a 12-course degustation menu? I don't think that's that kind of restaurant, but I do think it affected some. And so I think that had a factor. I think the hangover of COVID was a real, we all changed our habits, whether it's going to work or working from home, our habits just changed. And I think that had a bit of a challenge on restaurants. I think we are cooking way less than we ever were at home. So the budget that we have to go to a nice restaurant is maybe more spread now because we're having someone else cook for us more often, whether that's meal delivery, whether that's fast casual, whatever it is. I think there's a variety of factors, but I think the thing that we find so hard in the business is we know what things cost in terms of the cost of ingredients as well as the cost of labor. So we know that we should be charging more than we are, but we also know if we put our prices up, people will stop coming. So, there's that kind of, we're a little out of balance in our business, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you would know, there's a very similar thing happening in Australia with costs of goods and overheads going up for restaurants. At the same time, the household budgets are getting tighter and tighter.
Yeah.
There's actually quite a lot of sides to Curtis Stone that some Australians may not be aware of. You've got serious culinary training, you've worked under Marco Pierre White, you've won several Michelin stars, but Australians are kind of less familiar with that side of you and know you more as the guy in the Coles ads.
Yeah.
Do you wear a different persona when you're in America?
Oh, God, I think I'm the same human as I always am. And I love what I do. I love working in restaurants and I love being behind the pass and in the weeds with my team. There's nothing I like more, actually. I also love creating recipes that home cooks can follow and have success with their families. To me, it's the same thing. It's funny, we're talking about the restaurant business being nurturing and giving. And I'll never forget looking out into the dining room once I was senior enough to be able to do that and watching someone taste the food that I prepared. And in this one moment, I saw this guy kind of have this reaction. And then he quickly got more on his fork and gave it to his partner. And she tried it and had a similar reaction. It made me feel like, oh my God, I stood in this kitchen for 15 hours today and it was absolutely worth it because they loved it. And I had the exact same feeling when someone approached me on the street in Melbourne and was like, oh my God, you're Curtis, the guy from Coles. He's like, I cook your salmon recipe every Friday night, with the broccoli and the orange. And I was like, I knew exactly the recipe he's talking about. And I thought, oh my God, I've never met this guy, but he's having a nice experience because I wrote a recipe. And that made me feel just as good as working in a Michelin-starred restaurant. And it still genuinely does. I think as a dad who works a lot, it's not easy to get food on the table, and the payoff's got to be they like it. Otherwise, you shouldn't have bothered, because if they don't eat it and go, that's delicious, then it's kind of all for nothing. So helping people in that way, I find really rewarding.
How does the produce of Southern California compare to what we can get in Australia in, say, Melbourne or Sydney?
Oh, don't do that to me. It's so hard to answer because, Southern California grows some of the greatest vegetables in the world. Really, it's sunshine 9 months of the year. There's also real diversity in the growing conditions here. I buy carrots out of the high desert and that has a frost on the ground 9 months of the year, and it's only 40 minutes from Hollywood. And I buy tomatoes out of San Diego, which is a couple of hours south, but it's, within a couple of hours, you can have totally different climates, which is really unique. So the produce here is good. It's good. And there's kind of also this like hippie-ish kind of Southern Californian thing where people still want to do things naturally and organic. And so that's awesome. That said, we're also extremely lucky in Australia, right? We're a giant island and we grow things all over the place. From northern Queensland, we've got beautiful tropics, beautiful tropical ingredients on our doorstep. And we can also grow strawberries in Queensland in the middle of winter, where that doesn't make a ton of sense if you're from Tasmania or Victoria, because strawberries are a spring fruit. So, we have real diversity within Australia, and we also grow great things. So I couldn't choose one over the other.
Very diplomatic. Would you ever move back to Australia to open a restaurant here?
I'd love to. Yeah, I would. My wife's an actress, and LA has always been the home of the entertainment business. So that's a challenge, and I've got restaurants here too. So maybe I didn't think it through brilliantly at the beginning, but it is difficult to just like pick up and disappear because you've got other responsibilities. And now, of course, I've got a 13-year-old, a 10-year-old who are in school. So there's lots of things to consider. But I absolutely love coming home. I really feel like I live my best life because I'm back home 6 or 7 times a year. And I still feel totally like an Aussie, and I get to, when I talk about, I'm always talking about it from an Aussie perspective, I think, but I do still live a lot of my life here. So who knows? I'd love to open a restaurant there. Absolutely.
You are going to be coming home again next month for Melbourne Food and Wine Festival, and you are hosting their flagship event, the World's Longest Lunch.
Yeah.
I've been to a few of these events, and it is really quite amazing seeing them get lunch out to 1,700 people pretty much at the same time.
Right.
How does one do that? You have an events company and they're going to be catering it. Right. How do you get lunch out to 1,700 people?
Well, it's a big number. We do the SAG Awards over here, and that's 1,200. But it's a bit more controlled. The longest lunch, of course, is in a different location each year. So it's not like you've got that institutional knowledge as to exactly how to work a space or so you have to have an incredible team. That's the first thing, right? You need great ingredients and incredible team. Otherwise, you just can't do it. And then you need to really segment that out and be like, all right, you kind of replicate in kitchens across the lunch because one kitchen can't possibly serve that many plates fast enough. So we'll have team leaders who are sort of executing little sections of that lunch so we can drop it all together and it'll all be super consistent and delicious, but that's years of practice, yeah.
Are there any dishes that are absolute no-goes when you're feeding that many people?
Oh, look, I think that the easy choice is to try and take care of everyone's allergies and dietary preferences. We choose not to do that, actually. I'd rather still be kind of unique and interesting, and hopefully our food is something that everyone wants to come to. And if it's not, we get it, and that's all right, But I never like to just do generic stuff and be like, all right. You see it quite often now, and I think it's because there are so many more allergies and preferences. So people tend to say, well, let's make the vegetarian gluten-free. Actually, let's make it vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free. And then it just kind of becomes this homogenized. It's back when we had no creativity around plant-based dining, and you'd always, like the poor veggies out there, they'd go out for dinner and they'd get an artichoke salad or an fanned avocado salad and then a risotto, and that was that, and it was kind of like always the same option. So I always try and be more inventive with the menu. And of course, you get some pushback. Sometimes clients are like, "You're crazy. We can't serve that to 1,700 people." But Melbourne Food and Wine's all about gastronomy, so they're on board.
Are you allowed to tell us anything you'll be cooking?
No, I'm not.
Top secret?
It's top secret.
Wow.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure whether they've published the menu or not, but I might get in trouble if I say the wrong thing.
Okay. We're having some really sort of interesting discussions and debates in Australian hospitality at the moment. Some of it is around kitchen culture and safety at work and things like that. Another really interesting discussion has been some of the comments made by one of our most famous chefs, Ben Shuri of Attica, who has spoken out quite strongly against restaurant critics. Right. He feels that the system is corrupt and that most restaurant critics are not qualified to judge the food of chefs with as much experience as himself. What do you think about the role that critics can play in today's system where we've got reviews, there's Google ratings, there's TikTok creators?
Right.
Where does the restaurant critic fit into that?
God, it's such a good question. It's such an interesting debate. Like I mentioned I worked for Marco Pierre White, and I watched him spend a massive chunk of his life in pursuit of Michelin stars, like no two bones about it. Like that was our goal. We had to be excellent so that we were rated really well. And then I think he went full circle with it and was like, they don't know as much as we do. Why should we be judged by them? And there's real validity in that, but then it's also commentary. And I know food critics that are brilliant at their job and have incredible insights and intel, and they have a beautiful way of writing about it. And ultimately, if you're not open to criticism, then you're not open to being spoken about, and I think that that's really important because that's how your restaurant gets busy. First of all, it's word of mouth. If your guests like their experience, they go out into the world and they tell people about it, and they tell their coworkers and their friends and their family, I had a great meal. And then hopefully those people come to you. That's how we thrive. That's how we die as well. If we're no good and we give people bad experiences, they also go and talk about it. So I'm totally open to being reviewed. I get Ben's point because sometimes you get reviewed. I remember doing a dish when I worked in London, and I made a sauce that I served with tagliatelle from the head of the langoustines. So I took the langoustine heads and I put them in a blender, and then I roasted it and I deglazed it with Madeira and brandy. And then I covered it in a shellfish stock that I'd made separately, and I reduced it down. And it came out like this beautifully pink flavor of crustacea. And I served it with langoustine tails and the tagliatelle. And
langoustines are a specific type of prawn, right?
Prawn, yeah, scampi. So the next day I read the review, and he spoke about it was a very positive review, but he spoke about the lightly scented tomato sauce that was served with. And I was like, tomatoes, there's not a tomato that goes near that sauce. So sometimes now, had that been a slating review where he says it was wrong and he used tomatoes out of season, then I probably read that and want to burn the newspaper because you're like, you don't know what you're talking about, right? So I totally get both sides of it, and it's not easy. I watched what Ben did. Ben's a dear friend of mine, and I respect him. And I really respect someone he's gone through the highs and the lows as well, right? We've all gone through the lows. Not many of us get to the highs that Ben had. So to be able to come out and be like, you know what? Check your ego at the door. Do a good job. Let your customers decide. Don't get all wound up in the awards. I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Have you ever had any reviews that have really crushed you or knocked your sense of self or sense of what you were doing?
God, I don't know that I've read a review that's crushed me. I've probably disagreed with some of them. Good and bad, right? I just gave you an example of one that I was left going, oh my God, I actually can't take the credit for anything you're saying because you actually didn't even get it, you know? And I'm glad that was in London and I don't work there anymore because I can talk openly about it. But the truth is, if that was in LA and that critic was working for a publication that I lived in fear of, then I probably wouldn't tell the story. And that's garbage. You should be able to tell this, but like I said, I know some incredible food critics that I've learned a lot from over the years, that have done a beautiful job, and I've loved reading their pieces, so it's a hard one.
Yeah, we're living through very interesting times. Do we need a Michelin guide in Australia? You've worked with one and without one in LA as it's come and gone over the years.
Yeah.
What's your feeling on the role that it can play?
The incredible thing about the Michelin guide is it's reliable and it's consistent, right? So I don't know that I've ever gone into a 1 Michelin star restaurant and been like, that did not deserve the star, or a 2-star and been like, that was only a 1 star. It's very clear that they do their job properly. Now, if you're a competitive person like me, I love it because I don't want to lose a star. I want to get I want to know where I'm at. If I'm playing sport, I want to play to win. I don't want to not keep score. I want to win. So I think it's incredibly positive. It's also great. What I've sort of really noticed is it's kind of almost a gentle education of the diner to know what's what and where things are at, and I think that you see the dining public really responding to it, so I think that's cool. The one thing that makes me pause ever so slightly is when I did Maud, it was very experimental. And like I said, we did one ingredient, all these different menus. And then if I had have had that idea back when the Michelin guide was in existence in LA, it wasn't when I started, I might have thought to myself, God, it's too inconsistent for the guide to judge or take seriously. So I don't know whether you have that same level of freedom as a chef to be like, I'll just try anything. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know that it's a bad thing. I don't know. I love the guide. I think they do a wonderful job. I'll always respect it. I feel very blessed to have been included in it and to 1 stars in both my restaurants. And I think it'd be great for Australia. The thing that I think the most about, sorry, you've touched on something that gets me going. I don't know that the rest of the world understands how fantastic Australian food is. And I'm constantly talking about it and I'm constantly explaining it to people. But I don't think they get it. When they go, that people are like, wow, the food's really good. And because of that response, I'm like, yeah, people don't appreciate us for what we can do back there. And I think the guide would help explain that to people.
Yeah, right. So putting Australian restaurants more on a world stage.
Yeah, for sure.
If there's one thing that you wish people paid more attention to when they were shopping for food, what would it be?
Oh, good question. I think the thing that we haven't really wrapped our heads around as a society is how much food we waste. And that's at every stage, right? We waste food in the farm because maybe it doesn't fit perfectly into the parameters. It's slightly too big, slightly too small, has a tiny bit of damage from some hail, but hasn't changed the flavor. So anyway, there's waste there. There's waste in the store because, we put things out. We hope that people come to buy them. But if they don't get there fast enough, we're like, we can't leave it out too long. And then, of course, as a shopper, we're all guilty of this. You look in your fridge at the end of the week and you're like, I never made it to those zucchinis or I never got to those carrots. So I think especially in moments where the cost of living's nuts and it's a real challenge for families, I think being super mindful about what we're buying and how we're going to use it, having that plan in place before you actually get your food is important, or go buy, be inspired by the season, whatever, grab it, but then come home and have a real plan for it and have a bit of a backup plan as well. I always make a soup at the end of every week and everything in my crisper goes in it and it's a delicious soup. My kids have no idea they're eating leftovers, but I think and it's also just the responsible thing to do. We all talk about the environment. we waste almost half of what we grow. And if we were to cut back on that substantially, we would have literally, if we wasted nothing, we'd have half the environmental footprint than we have with food. So there's lots of reasons to really think that through when you do your shopping.
All right, great. Thank you. Good tips there, Curtis. And yeah, thanks. It's been a great chat.
Lovely chatting to you. It's fun.
That was Curtis Stone speaking with Good Food restaurant editor Emma Breheny on the latest Good Weekend Talks. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, rate and comment wherever you get your podcasts, and keep tuning in for more compelling conversations. Good Weekend Talks is brought to you by the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, proud newsrooms powered by subscriptions. To support independent journalism, search Subscribe Sydney Morning Herald or The Age. This episode of Good Weekend Talks is produced by Conrad Marshall and edited by Tim Mummery, with technical assistance from Cormac Lally. Our executive producer is Tammy Mills, Tom McKendrick is head of audio, and Greg Callahan is the acting editor of Good Weekend.